They were able to ban this app before they were able to do anything about Flint, Michigan. They were able to agree on banning this app before giving aid to Puerto Rico. Forget the medical industry or the fact that they haven't done anything to solve school shootings.
40,000 Americans die every single year because they can't afford fucking health insurance, but our government's worried about an app.
Where is our rage? Where is the anger that should come with this moment?
Help! Please! Children are dying! Help! Help me! How do we stop this?
Okay, gosh, look here. We just signed this. This should help everything. Take it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We needed a real change. Thank you. Oh my gosh,
I've already decided if they ban TikTok, I'm opening up a Chinese bank account. Yeah, you don't want them to have my information, I'm gonna fund their fucking country, you stupid whack ass bitch. Because my thing is this, most of the shit that we buy already comes from China anyways, let's just cut out the middleman.
This app has enabled me to raise over $90,000 for various charities and people in my time here.
Fuck you, U.S. government.
How fucking funny would it be if they ban TikTok and then we all move to the actual Chinese version of TikTok?
You just heard from creators on TikTok who are coming to terms with the fact that the app that they've used for years now is about to be taken away from them for completely arbitrary reasons. And as you saw, they not only reject the bullshit excuses our government used as a justification for this ban, but they also took note of the fact that banning TikTok was prioritized before any meaningful policies that would actually help them survive. So people know what's going on. They're wide-eyed about how corrupt and frankly how evil our government is, and not all of the people that you heard from are even explicitly political, which suggests that a lot of apolitical people are becoming radicalized as a result of this ban, which is ironic since another reason why they said we couldn't have TikTok was because it was supposedly radicalizing us. Turns out, taking it away was the real catalyst for radicalization. So good job, politicians. You played that one real well. But remember, they never wanted to ban the app from us. They said that they wanted to make it better because they care about us and they care about what we want.
This is not an attempt to ban TikTok. It's an attempt to make TikTok better. Tic-tac-toe. A winner. A winner.
So that turned out to be a load of complete horseshit. Predictably so. Now, at the time that I record this video, TikTok is set to be banned on January 19th, which is this Sunday, unfortunately. And as absurd as it sounds to say this, the Supreme Court really was TikTok's last hope. But I'll be honest, it just doesn't look good. And I say this because the Supreme Court heard oral arguments recently about the ban, and here's how that went. As Eloise Goldsmith of Common Dreams explains, during oral arguments, justices across the ideological spectrum asked tough questions of both sides, but the overall tone and thrust appeared to suggest greater skepticism toward the arguments by lawyers for TikTok and its users that the First Amendment barred Congress from enacting the law, according to Friday reporting from the New York Times. Yeah, so they're likely not going to side with TikTok, even though Donald Trump explicitly asked them to, even if it is for self-serving reasons. But I mean, it was a last-ditch effort, and it's probably not going to amount to much. With that being said, the silver lining was that the court seemingly wasn't convinced by the idea that the Chinese government might covertly use the app to steal data or manipulate Americans into hating America. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. But the fact that our highest court didn't automatically side with TikTok when this is a pretty clear-cut First Amendment issue kind of shows you how not so supreme the court has become. And this speaks to the illegitimacy of our entire government more broadly. Now, on that note, I do want to get back to the TikTokers here because many of them responded to the notion that the Chinese Communist Party was using TikTok to radicalize them. And one response in particular thoroughly dismantled that argument. And I want to show that for you right now.
Fascist countries ban apps and websites under the guise of threats to national security, when every other country knows it's about suppressing the free speech of its citizens. If the government believes that a single app could, quote from the hearing on the 10th, skew the perspective of American citizens to be anti-American, maybe the real problem is that American citizens are already in such a state of political unrest and unhappiness that our government is scared a single foreign influence could tip the scale and have it all be over. Don't you think that by taking away the, and I quote, key communications channel of Americans, it's gonna make those 170 million Americans a little more anti-American? Maybe Congress knows and understands that. Maybe the government knows that the backlash it will receive from banning TikTok does not outweigh the threats that come with its existence. Not in a matter of national security, but in a matter of being the most popular news and media outlet that the government cannot control, like American-owned broadcasting networks and publications. Maybe, if this was actually a national security concern, the government would be banning all Chinese-developed apps, like Shein and Temu, that collect the exact same amount of data as TikTok. Because maybe it knows TikTok is something special. You can't politically organize on Temu. If TikTok goes dark, the government deliberately and knowingly took away your free speech.
That is precisely it. And what she's saying isn't overly cynical or hyperbolic because multiple politicians have admitted that. For example, Senator Mitt Romney and War Criminal Secretary of State Antony Blinken discussed how difficult it is to control the narrative with regard to the Gaza genocide that they're doing, in part because of TikTok. Because when you go on TikTok, it is disproportionately pro-Palestine and anti-Israel. Now, I would argue that that's because people who use the app are young and they're just already pro-Palestine, and they're not becoming pro-Palestine because of the app. The app is pro-Palestine because people who are pro-Palestine are using the app, who happen to be young people. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear straight from the horse's mouth about them admitting that this ban is about controlling the narrative when it comes to genocide.
You have a social media ecosystem environment in which context, history, facts get lost, and the emotion, the impact of images dominates, and we can't discount that. But I think it also has a very, very, very challenging effect on the narrative.
Yeah, a small parenthetical point, which is some wonder why there was such overwhelming support for us to shut down potentially TikTok or other entities of that nature. If you look at the postings on TikTok and the number of mentions of Palestinians relative to other social media sites, it's overwhelmingly so among TikTok.
So they're not even hiding it. In other words, the victims of a genocide our country is complicit with are sharing unfiltered footage of their pain and suffering on TikTok, among other platforms, and the government doesn't want you to see that because it makes you sympathize with them and it makes our government look bad. And the fact that you're not buying their narrative, since you're hearing straight from the people who are the victims of our government's imperialism and support for genocide, that's a problem for them. And worse, the fact that you're going out of your way to denounce these actions and share information that dismantles their propaganda, that is something that they simply will not allow. So they're banning TikTok, specifically because they want to silence your voice and because TikTok is a direct threat to their legitimacy, period. And it's not lost on people that they prioritized this before addressing so many other more pressing matters, which is something a lot of TikTokers pointed out when they talked about the TikTok ban.
Instead of putting money anywhere useful, an inordinate amount of our money goes towards funding G-sides around the world. People can't afford groceries or rent or healthcare or anything important. And instead of doing anything that's actually productive, the government decided to chop people's income, their source of revenue, their small businesses, their community building, their entertainment, right at the neck. And our mentality is more or less that we'll just kind of keep on trucking because we've always trucked on and we'll just find somewhere else to go, or maybe we won't, we'll make the most of this moment. And like, that's all good and dandy and everything, but where's the rage about that? Don't get me wrong, like I will be making my goodbye videos, I will be figuring out what other platforms I'm moving to, like I'll be doing all of the things as well. But at the same time, I just wonder, like, when are we going to realize we don't have to live this way, you know?
I'm not a lawmaker. I'm not a politician. I didn't even graduate college. I'm just a musician who's trying to do my part, trying to write songs that actually fucking matter, and at the very least, make people feel less alone. Because I don't know what it looks like to you, but to me, it's looking pretty fucking ugly out here.
I don't want to hear anything ever again from a politician about the economy, about small business or helping working class people, because the amount of jobs and the amount of income that's being taken away from people that use this app every day, all to ensure that these fucking boomers, some of which are being found in elderly homes, get their cut before you get yours, using a xenophobic notion of national security to try and convince you that your data is in safer hands with Musk or Zuckerberg or whoever the fuck.
It's no wonder why people get their news from creators on TikTok. I mean, these people are far more entertaining and knowledgeable and insightful than any drone on mainstream media, and I would much rather listen to them than some talking head on Fox News or MSNBC or CNN. And what they're speaking to here is really important. So in banning TikTok, the government isn't just taking away a source of entertainment for people, they're destroying the livelihoods of millions of Americans. It'd be like if they banned YouTube. It would literally destroy my livelihood because YouTube is my job. And the same is true for people on TikTok. But they are losing their platforms and their livelihoods as a result. And people have used this app to pull themselves out of poverty because they built careers for themselves by being entertaining or insightful, not to mention so many small businesses. And I mean, the actual small businesses blew up on TikTok because they used it to effectively market themselves. But that's all being taken away from these people like that. And most politicians couldn't care less. They don't care that this ban is going to hurt people. They're just doing something that benefits them and their donors and serves their interests. But I think that this ban could actually come back to bite politicians in the ass one day because, you know, the worse that things become, the more we're going to need apps like TikTok that do entertain us, even though it's much more than an app for entertainment. But we need distractions. We need things to get us through this dystopian hellscape that we're all living through. But if we keep losing things that we love and we don't have as many distractions as we used to, that's when society starts to break down. That's when, you know, things get much worse. And I think that that's what these short-sighted politicians fail to see. Because right now, you know, we're not quite ready to bust out the pitchforks because even though there's really no social cohesion and we're all pretty fractured and lonely, you know, we still have things to entertain and distract us like Netflix and video games. But I mean, those distractions are becoming more expensive, and in some ways they're getting worse, as all things inevitably do get worse under capitalism. But, you know, as we lose more and more things that keep us occupied and get us to not think about the hellscape that we're living in, that becomes a real problem when people are already deprived of material goods that they need to survive. I mean, those distractions help us cope with the pain and suffering of everyday life. But when we lose these distractions, that is when people start to look seriously at the pitchforks. Because if politicians are now depriving us of like the 10 minutes of dopamine we get while watching TikTok while we shit, what else are they going to take from us if we can't even have that? I mean, if we can't have healthcare, if we can't have education or debt cancellation, if we can't have housing, and we can't even fucking have TikTok, what can we have? Were we just put on this rock to suffer? I mean, that's what people start to wonder when you take away every little thing from them and you leave them with nothing. And it's not just about TikTok, to be clear, but it adds to that feeling of disillusionment people feel with the system for the fact that politicians can find time to make us suffer, but they never have time to ease our suffering, and they're starting to really see that. But at the time that I record this video, the TikTok ban is set to go into effect on January 19th, which is this Sunday, as I stated, and it means that it's not going to be offered in the app stores. Now, from my understanding, you can still use TikTok if you already have the app downloaded on your phone, but it'll eventually become too unstable to use since there's not going to be any updates, which do come through the app stores. But there's also a legitimate security risk, not a bullshit one, if you use an app that can't be updated. So, you know, TikTok is not long for this world, it seems. But in preparation of the ban, TikTokers are uniting around a couple of different causes intended to piss off the US government one last time before they go down. So the first thing that they're doing is migrating to a different app called RedNote, and the following TikToker explains why this is especially going to get under the skin of the politicians who voted to ban TikTok.
There is this app called RedNote. It is the Chinese version of TikTok that you can download in the App Store. And because this legislation is just targeting ByteDance, I'm pretty sure after January 19th, RedNote will still be available in the App Store. How fucking funny would it be if they ban TikTok and then we all move to the actual Chinese version of TikTok? Like, would that not be the biggest fuck you to the government ever of like, oh, you're going to take TikTok away because you're worried about Chinese security threats? Just to show you how little we give a fuck, we are going to move to the actual Chinese version of this app. I don't think it solves the monetization concern for TikTok creators, but as an act of protest, holy shit, would this be so fucking funny.
That would be funny indeed. And guess what? It's actually happening. RedNote is now the #1 app in the App Store at the time that I record this video, and I've personally seen multiple TikTokers I follow announce that they're moving to RedNote as well. So there's that, but there's more because TikTokers have made it clear that if their app is going down, they're not moving to Reels on Instagram, which is kind of seen as the main competitor to TikTok aside from YouTube Shorts. But what they're doing is they're responding to this expectation that everybody is going to go to Reels by launching an app-wide boycott on Meta in an effort to take Meta down with TikTok.
TikTok, ByteDance, does not need 160 million users to survive. So if they lose the entire US base, they will be fine. They will continue to operate successfully without us. However, 160 million people not using anything in the US, wink, wink, would absolutely crush, crash, bankrupt, and zero out any of those other businesses. 10 days is a long time to establish the largest, most successful boycott of all time. So let's pick. If TikTok is going down, who's going down with them?
I have a video at the end of this TikTok that is going to show you that both Democrats and Republicans have their hand in the Meta pot. Yes, that's right. They own a lot of stock in it. And you'll see who it is, both Democrat and Republican. I am asking for us to come together for literally less than 48 hours. I am calling for a mass exodus from Meta.
It's the way that Zuck thought that everybody was going to go back to Meta once TikTok got bananaed, but all I see is everybody talking about how they're never going to go back to Meta.
And that right there is a brilliant ploy if they can actually pull it off. Because lawmakers didn't just vote to ban TikTok to censor speech that they didn't like. They also voted to ban TikTok because, as that creator pointed out, they all make money off of the success of TikTok's competitor, Meta. So you could actually argue that the TikTok ban was passed at the behest of Mark Zuckerberg because, as Donald Shaw of Sludge reports, Meta Platforms and its subsidiaries spent a record high of $7.6 million on lobbying the federal government in the first quarter of the year as the U.S. Congress advanced legislation that could ban Instagram's chief competitor, TikTok. And I guess that politicians think that we don't know about this information, right? They assume that we're going to be ignorant and just accept whatever bullshit they feed to us. But again, we don't get our information through mainstream media like previous generations. We get our information through creators on TikTok, through YouTube, through people who aren't actually beholden to corporate interests and corporate advertisers, through people who are going to give you just the straight facts with no corporate spin. So, this is a transparent attempt to stifle free speech that just so happens to also bolster a TikTok competitor that's been lobbying the US government pretty heavily. People see this for what it is. And the fact that so many people are having a meaningful conversation about money and politics, corruption, and genocide on this app, that is genuinely encouraging to me and one of the reasons why I'm so sad to see this app go. But you have to understand that's one of the reasons why politicians want to see this app go, because people are learning from this app. They're getting factual information and they're not buying the bullshit that we were sold by mainstream media. Now, it is worth noting that me being against the TikTok ban isn't necessarily a defense of social media more broadly speaking, because obviously, like all social media apps, TikTok isn't perfect and there are issues. And, TikTok can arguably be dangerous depending on certain algorithmic rabbit holes that you go down. But out of all the social media platforms, TikTok actually does the most to reduce harm, whereas others like Twitter go out of their way to increase harm, to boost misinformation and incentivize hate speech. So the fact that TikTok is the problem, that's what makes this all just so much worse. It's just the propaganda on top of the double standard and the self-serving votes by politicians. Like, it is leading to people being so radicalized. And these politicians they don't see that. They don't understand how they're making things worse. But in conclusion, you know, unless nothing changes, all of these brilliant young people that we heard from, they're going to lose the platforms that they built for themselves, which is genuinely heartbreaking. But if politicians think that this is going to somehow make people hate the government less, well, they're about to find out the hard way that the opposite is true.